Hello everyone, Chag Sameach. Welcome to the White House's People's Seder. My name is Shelley Greenspan and I have the honor of serving as the White House's Jewish liaison. Just a few nights ago, during the beginning of our Passover Seder, we pointed to the matzah and said, "This is lachma anya, the bread of poverty and oppression that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt." This was followed by an invitation, "Let all those who are hungry come and eat." Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out how strange this invitation is. What hospitality is it to offer the hungry matzah of all things? It is a taste of slavery, of suffering, a poor person's bread. Matzah represents two things in reality. It is the food of slaves, and it is also the food our ancestors ate as they left Egypt in liberty and freedom. What in fact transforms the bread of affliction into the bread of freedom is our ability to share it with others, our willingness to share with others. The lessons of Passover combine individual and social responsibility. The Seder itself is integral to Jewish faith and identity. We keep the tradition alive as a reminder of who we are and what we've been through, and as a recurring call to action to shape a better future. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce my colleague and co-host of today's Seder, Samantha Joseph, who is the director of the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the United States Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Shelley, and Chag Sameach, everyone. USDA is thrilled to partner with the White House to bring today's People's Seder to families and communities across the country. Growing up, I watched my mom, the extraordinary Rabbi Shira Joseph, officiate more Seders than I can count. Inspired by her commitment to improving the lives of others, I am proud to be the first Jewish woman to ever lead a Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Too many people, including Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, military families and veterans, LGBTQ older adults, single mothers, and the people of Puerto Rico face the painful choice between paying for nutritious food and other basic needs like medical care and shelter. It is truly an honor to serve President Biden and Vice President Harris to help advance their goals to end hunger. Please join me in welcoming our Agriculture Secretary, Tom Vilsack, who every day encourages our team at USDA to take bold action to reduce barriers for historically underserved communities in America.
Happy Passover to all who celebrate. This week, Jews across the world come together with family, friends, neighbors, and strangers to celebrate the holiday of Passover. One of the major themes of this Seder is that we must let all who are hungry come and eat. And as Agriculture Secretary, it's my honor to lead the department that plays a major role in ensuring that people across the country have access to affordable, nutritious food. This mission has long been a foundational piece of the work we do here at the People's Department. And at USDA, we take seriously the charge of feeding the American people and the world. USDA is responsible for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, better known as SNAP, which is a cornerstone of our federal nutrition safety net, providing vital assistance to over 41 million Americans. In the past year, we've taken a big step that resulted in the first permanent increase to the purchasing power of SNAP benefits since the Thrifty Food Plan was introduced 45 years ago. We also run the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC, which protects the nutritional interest of low-income pregnant, breastfeeding, and non-breastfeeding postpartum women and infants and children up to the age of 5. And for millions of students, we work to bring nutritious options to school meals. Research shows school meals are, for some children, the healthiest or only meal they eat in a day. And to supplement these meals during the summer months, we've made the Summer EBT Benefits Program permanent so that students can eat well when school is not in session. And to the states that operate the Emergency Food Assistance Program, we provide American-grown USDA foods and administrative funds to support food banks and pantries. On top of these programs, we are also committed to transforming the food system as part of our support of President Biden's goal to end hunger and increase healthy eating and physical activity by 2030. We do all of this for one reason, because at USDA, food and nutrition security is part of our mission, and it's an honor to speak at an event that recognizes the value of this work. As you enjoy your Seder meal, also be reminded that you have neighbors, friends, and family who do not have such equitable access to nutritious foods. And USDA is committed to building a future where no one goes to bed hungry. Thank you again for your commitment to this cause, and let all who are hungry come to eat. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Magid Rachza, Moti Matzah, Maror Korech, Shulchan Orech, Tzafon Barech, Halel Nirtzah.
Thank you, 613, for sharing the order of our Passover Seder with that special performance of Kadesh Orchatz. I'm honored to welcome Rabbi Lauren Tuckman, a Jewish educator based in the Washington, D.C. area, to lead us in the Kadesh. Rabbi Tuckman was named to the Jewish Week's 36 Under 36 for her innovative leadership concerning the inclusion of Jews with disabilities in all aspects of Jewish life. Thank you for joining us.
Kaddish is the series of blessings we make over a glass of wine to commemorate the holiday and to transition from ordinary time to sacred time. Passover is the time of our freedom, when we commemorate our redemption from enslavement in Egypt through the ritual meal known as the Seder. At this point, we have gathered around our Seder tables, we have filled our first cup of wine, and we are ready to sanctify the day. We are ready to enter this holy season of freedom. Passover is a central observance in the Jewish tradition, and it commemorates freedom. It commemorates the gratitude we have for the freedom that we experience and the opportunities it presents us. Yet, we know that we cannot celebrate our Feast of Freedom without being aware of our many fellow Americans who are faced with food insecurity and all kinds of suffering in this world. How can we make sure that we are acting to build a better world, to do as the Jewish tradition commands us, tikkun olam, to repair the world? As we enter our celebration, as we begin our holiday together, let us not forget that we have a mandate to act to ensure that others are able to enjoy their own celebration of freedom. In fact, the Jewish tradition commands us to give tzedakah, or charity, before Passover to ensure that those around us, that our neighbors, our friends, our fellow citizens, are able to enjoy their own bounty, are able to take part in their own feast. I will now lead us in Kaddish, and you will notice that I am doing so from a Hebrew Braille Haggadah. Chag Sameach, happy Passover. May this be a time of liberation for us all. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'am, v'ramamanu mikol hashon, v'kiddushtanu b'mitzvotav. V'titein la'Adonai Eloheinu b'yahava, moedim l'simcha, chagim zmanim l'sason, et yom chag hamatzot hazeh, zman chirutenu mikra kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, ki banu b'charta v'otanu kiddashta mikol ha'amim, u'modei kodechav simcha v'tzason hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazamanim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
And now we will welcome Jana Siller, the farm director at Adamah, and her team of farmers. Adamah is an organization cultivating vibrant Jewish life and deep connection with the earth. Like many community organizations, Adamah receives grants from USDA in support of its conservation efforts. Jana will lead us in the blessing over the karpas, our green vegetable.
Oh, hi. Welcome to Adamah. What better place to say the blessing over the karpas, the green vegetable over which we say borei pri ha'adamah, than a vegetable farm called Adamah.
Adamah is a beautiful Hebrew word that shares a root with the name Adam or Adam. bringing together meanings of earth, dust, soil, and humanity. From this word, we learn that humans and nature are not two separate entities, but rather two parts of the same whole with intertwined faiths.
With karpas, the green vegetable, the Haggadah turns our attention to the new season. In the agrarian context in which the Haggadah was written, an awareness around the awakening and new growth surrounding the ritual would have been inescapable. That is very true here at Adamah Farm, where spring is everywhere.
In this part of the Seder, when we bless the fruits of the earth, we notice our place in the cycles of the world and how to live better within it.
Here at Adamah, we use regenerative farming practices that integrate the wisdom of our ancestors all over the world, of indigenous peoples who have partnered with this land for generations, and the newest science of how to sustain humanity while maintaining the health of our home.
For fertility, we turn food waste into compost and grow soil-building cover crops. We use water-conserving irrigation systems, we reduce soil erosion by keeping the ground covered, we invite pollinators and pest predators onto the farm by maintaining habitat for them. We use rotational grazing to feed our animals. We feed our chickens the pizza crusts and apple cores rejected by local elementary school student lunches. We recently embarked on an agroforestry project on a slope too steep to grow vegetable crops. We are so excited that the Inflation Reduction Act has expanded conservation programs through USDA. We hope that momentum builds because it would be amazing if farmers across America could rely on these types of systems to produce food for local communities, harness the energy of the sun, store carbon, and take care of ecosystems.
Mom, I'm lost. I don't see the words USDA or Inflation Reduction anywhere on the Haggadah. Do you, love?
Nah, I don't see it anywhere.
I'm sorry, you're right. Let's get back to the Seder. All right, everyone take some karpas. Who wants to say the blessing?
We will. We will.
Amazing. Whether you're in this greenhouse with us or at the White House, we hope that while we say this blessing and while you taste the green vegetable, you'll think about everything that went into growing this plant.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam barei peri ha'adamah.
Amen.
Wow. Thank you, Jana and Team Adamah, for your hard work and dedication. Your partnership with USDA is an inspiring example of how we can work together to address big challenges like climate change and food insecurity. Now that we've had our veggies, it's time for yachatz, the breaking of the middle matzah. Please join me in welcoming Eric Fingerhut, President and CEO of the Jewish Federations of North America, representing Jewish federations and communities which together raise and distribute more than $3 billion to support social welfare, social services, and educational needs.
We have reached yachatz, which is Hebrew for to split or to break. There are 3 matzahs on our table. We break the middle matzah in 2. We leave the smaller piece on the table for the blessing over the matzah, which will come later, and we save the larger piece for the afikomen, which is the dessert of the Seder. Now, the most common explanation for breaking the matzah is that matzah is lechem oni, or the bread of poverty, and poor people are rarely able to enjoy a full piece of bread. Instead, they break their bread into smaller pieces to share with others who are also in need or to save the rest for later. But why do we break the matzah at this point in the Seder? After all, we could have set the table in advance with broken matzahs, just as we set the table with other symbolic foods. Or we could break the matzah right before we say the blessings and eat matzah for the first time. Why do we break the matzah now, right before we begin telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt? Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik taught that Pesach is, among other things, a holiday of solidarity. This includes solidarity between those of us who are blessed with plenty and those that are not. In other words, between the haves and the have-nots. The Rav noted that even in Egypt, not all Jews were slaves. There was a huge gap, as there is today, between those who were wealthy and paid high taxes but did not have to do physical labor, and those who were literally groaning under their burdens. And so, in Egypt, where matzah was the bread that our ancestors ate, the Rav says that one had a matzah and one had none. The former split the matzah in 2 and passed half to his unfortunate brother. The act of breaking the matzah is thus the perfect introduction to halach ma'anya, which comes next in our Seder and describes the bread of affliction. Thanks to yachatz, our bread of affliction has just been broken into pieces. We who live with the blessings of plenty must share our matzahs with the needy. We do this by supporting the most vulnerable through our private philanthropy, including the good work of the Jewish federations that I have the privilege of serving, and so many other organizations. And we do it also through our government, a bastion and beacon of freedom, the United States of America. This year especially, we express our appreciation to the USDA for taking important steps to ensure that those who are in need of food and observe the Jewish dietary laws are able to obtain kosher food, and to all those who work each day to ensure that our entire nation and all of humanity have bread to eat. And now, to introduce the next section of our Seder, I'm pleased to welcome the world-renowned Maccabees.
Thank you so much to the administration for inviting us. Halach Ma'anya introduces matzah to the Passover Seder. It also includes an invitation for those in need to join us at the Seder table.
It's traditionally recited in Aramaic, as that was the vernacular when the Haggadah was written.
In that spirit, we'll be performing Yedidia Admon's popular Halach Ma'anya melody with some words sung in English. Happy Passover and Chag Kasher V'Sameach.
Halach ma'anya di achalu av hatana be'ara de Mitzrayim be'ara de Mitzrayim. All who are hungry, join us and eat. At our Passover Seder, you'll always have a seat. Hashata hacha leshana haba be'ara de Yisrael. Hashata abde leshana haba b'nei chorin.
How special to hear the important and sacred words of Halach Ma'anya from the incredible Maccabees. Thank you. Like many Jews in America, and many of you joining us today, I trace my roots to Eastern Europe. And if any one of a million things had gone differently in each of my great-grandparents' journeys, I would not be here today. As we strive for liberation of those in need, we must remember our brothers and sisters struggling for their freedom in Ukraine. Several years ago, I had the honor of visiting the Jewish community of Dnipro, Ukraine, on a mission from Boston, their sister city. Dnipro is considered to be the heart of the Jewish community of Ukraine. When the war started, the Jewish community of Dnipro responded by taking in thousands of refugees from the east, feeding and housing them, providing for their medical needs, and orchestrating buses and trains to further safety. Despite the war and the recent missile attack on a building that took over 45 lives and wounded many others, the Jewish community of Dnipro has survived, and they are here today to show us that while the Passover story is rooted in the past, it is as much about the future, our collective future as a Jewish people. None of us are free until we all are. It is my honor to welcome Zelig Brez, the director of the Jewish community of Dnipro, and his family and community to our Seder.
Dear friends, we're addressing you from the Jewish community of Dnipro, Ukraine, in these most trying and terrible times that we were experiencing in the course of the last 12 months already. We've been helping, supporting, warming tens of thousands of people. This building was built to celebrate life, to celebrate revival. It was turned together with our beautiful Golden Rose Synagogue into a charitable warehouse, and hundreds of tons of humanitarian aid and food products were most urgently bought and brought here to provide help to so many people that were coming, staying, and continuing their way further. I'm very emotional now, but I need to tell you, we're very grateful to God that we were able to take care of so many people by not only providing food, but also taking care of their medical needs through the Jewish Medical Center and providing them shelter and assisting in their further evacuation. I want to tell you that we are now celebrating the beautiful holiday of Pesach. About 1,000 people are gathering in this hall for the two Seders to celebrate together the holiday of our unity and liberation. We were able to survive thanks to great support that was provided to the Jewish community just immediately after the war started. I want to thank everybody who helped us, and I need to highlight especially our sister community in Boston, the Jewish community of Boston, that from the first time of the war was with us and helping us in all possible ways. We are celebrating this holiday with this wonderful matzot that are baked in our community in a large matzah bakery, and they are brought from here all over the world. We are confident that with the acts of goodness and kindness and the fact that all the infrastructure, all the institutions in our community, medical, welfare, humanitarian, are working non-stop. We are adding light, and light will prevail, light will win, and we will soon celebrate peace and unity. And we cannot have bigger nachas, we cannot have bigger joy than asking our sons, our children, to say the traditional, to ask the traditional 4 questions. Ma nishtana?
מה נשתנה לילה זה מכל הלילות, מכל הלילות, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים חמץ או מצה, חמץ או מצה. הלילה זה כולו מצה, הלילה זה כולו מצה.
I would like to wish all Jewish people in the world that nothing should be able to separate us, that all the obstacles should be removed, that we can get reunited. And in this place, which is a center of life and revival, where we celebrate our central Passover Seder for almost 1,000 people, I would like to ask our dear choir that is performing every year to sing with us the anthem of our Jewish community.
Thank you to the Jewish community of Dnipro for blessing us with your presence today. There is no stronger Jewish tradition than asking questions, so it's no surprise that one of our key partners is joining us to add a 5th question to our Seder. Inspired by Jewish values and ideals, Mazon, a Jewish response to hunger, is a national organization fighting to end hunger among all people of faith and backgrounds in the United States and Israel. Welcome to Mazon President and CEO, Abby J. Liebman.
Mazon is so proud to be a part of the People's Seder this year. Passover provides an important moment for Jews to reflect on our history, which we've been doing for millennia. We do this because if we don't learn from our history, then we know we are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. As Jews, we are also people who ask questions, which are a vital part of the Passover Seder. The 4 questions mark a pivotal moment in that Seder. At Mazon each year, we also add a 5th question. And this year, the 5th question is, what lessons from our history should guide our nation's approach to end hunger? We know that in the United States, there was a point when we almost ended hunger in this country. In the 1960s and 70s, we saw the rate of hunger in the United States plummet to only 3%. Then changes in policy, leadership, rules, laws changed that number so that it has been steadily increasing until now it is over 10%. When we look back at our history, we can see what it was that we did that moved us in the other direction, the direction of decreasing hunger in America. So Mazon has conceived and launched a virtual hunger museum that does just that. It looks at our history for the last 150 years, not only in terms of what hunger was like in America, but the contributing sources to that hunger and how our government responded to it. We know that if we review where we've been and understand what we did in the past, we can again reverse this trend and move back to a time when we almost ended hunger in America.
The Hunger Museum is a digital representation of Jewish values, and it gives us an opportunity to explore the history of hunger over the past 100 years in the United States. Number one is the value that Judaism places on memory, an understanding that knowing where we come from helps us build a vision of what we want the future to look like. The second idea is the notion that comes from the Bible that we are responsible for our neighbors. In Hebrew, there's no word for charity. The word instead is tzedakah, which comes from the root for justice. Mazon's work is inspired by these values to make change in the world, and those values are for all people, not just Jews.
Thank you, Mazon, for challenging us to ask important questions that will help us forge a better future for all Americans. We will now learn about the history of the hunger movement and why it's so important to retell the Passover story each year. We welcome to our Seder U.S. Army veteran, Rabbi Sandra Lawson, the inaugural director of Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Reconstructing Judaism, and the founder of Kol HaPanim, an inclusive Jewish community that is relevant, accessible, and rooted in Jewish tradition.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. I'll go home, my Lord, and I'll be free. They'll be singing, they'll be singing, they'll be singing over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. I'll go home, my Lord, and I'll be free. They'll be shouting, they'll be shouting, they'll be shouting over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. I'll go home, my Lord, and I'll be free. Oh, freedom. I said, oh, freedom. a slave. I'll be buried in my grave. I'll go home to my Lord, and I'll be free. The holiday of Passover is also called Zaman Heritenu, a time of our freedom. The holiday of Passover is one of the most widely observed and celebrated of the Jewish holidays on our calendar, if not the most observed and celebrated holiday on our calendar. And I believe it's because the holiday is celebrated in the home. And over the years, over the centuries, friends and family have gathered together and created their own traditions around this holiday. Every Passover, we are commanded to recall the past and tell the story of our people's liberation from Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim, the narrow place. Mitzrayim, the place that caused us pain. And as we tell the story, we are asked to imagine that we ourselves were once enslaved and now we are free. As a Black woman in America, the history of American slavery is much closer in our collective memory than Israelite bondage. And I often think of my ancestors who were brought here as property, brought here as chattel, and I imagine that they found comfort in the biblical story of the Exodus, seeing themselves as the Israelite slaves and Pharaoh or the slave owner as Pharaoh. I also imagine them praying to God for freedom and never giving up hope. As a Jew and an African American, I carry the memory of two groups of people who were once enslaved, and I hold on to our collective memory of our escape from slavery to freedom. And like my ancestors who escaped the narrow place and my ancestors who fought for freedom in America, I pray for the freedom of all people. As Jews, if we celebrate our own liberation from slavery without working to empower and better the lives of those who suffer, we are failing to live up to our responsibility as Jews. Passover should remind us that remembering our collective story as enslaved people should inform our actions today. And we must strive for the liberation of all people, especially those marginalized. And as we eat our meal, let us remember those who are poor and those who are without sustenance. May those who suffer know justice and freedom.
Thank you, Rabbi Lawson, for that powerful performance and for sharing your story with us. Now we will hear from a rabbi whose organizations have been feeding unsheltered people and asylum seekers, providing safe homes and nutrition for foster children, and supporting families paid below minimum wage, struggling with food insecurity. Welcome social entrepreneur, social justice activist, educator, and the author of 23 books on Jewish ethics, Rabbi Dr. Shmuley Yanklowitz.
In the story of the Exodus, Moses famously and repeatedly goes to Pharaoh with a message from God. Let my people go that they may worship me. However, these calls for liberation do not immediately work. Pharaoh's heart stiffened, the Torah tells us, and he would not heed them. For this reason, God strikes Egypt with 10 plagues: blood, frogs, lice, wild animals, pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, and darkness, culminating in the slaying of every Egyptian firstborn son. Over and over again, in this process, as Pharaoh witnesses the destruction of his own nation, his heart continues to harden, and Pharaoh becomes even more set in his oppressive ways. Tonight, as we retell and remember the story of our freedom, we must take its moral lessons seriously. In our time, we live in a world with many plagues that are not punishments from God, but the result of our own hardened hearts. We live in a world with brutal hunger, not because of a lack of resources, but because of the plagues brought on by our own stubbornness. And so, we are gathered tonight because the tradition teaches us to have an annual moment of consciousness raising for the sake of justice. It teaches us to remember what it's like to live among hard-heartedness, so we can viscerally know exactly what to fight against. The Passover Seder is a call to smash our hearts of stone and return to our deeper down hearts of flesh, to work toward a world in which we can all, every day, truthfully say, "Let all who are hungry come and eat." Let's keep in mind the child experiencing neglect who arrives to school without eating breakfast and without a packed lunch. Let's remember the asylum seeker trekking through the desert without water. Let's not forget those who are unsheltered, sleeping in the streets, eating from the trash. Let's recall the sick and elderly without the funds or the care providers they need to get their meals. Let us never forget the villages throughout the global South, where food insecurity is all they have ever known. With that in mind, I will share 10 modern-day plagues, inspired by the fight against hunger. If you wish, as I name each of these plagues aloud, you can dip a finger into a cup of wine along with me and touch a drop of it onto your plate. Indifference, the failure to recognize food insecurity. Shame, the undue burden we place on hungry people. Indignity, the failure to treat hungry people with the respect they deserve. Stereotyping, the persistence of harmful misinformation about who is hungry. Absence, the lack of data showing the true scope of the problem. Humiliation, the pain parents feel when they cannot provide enough food for their children. Fatigue, the exhaustion from the constant cycle of poverty and hunger. Anxiety, the lingering fear that SNAP benefits won't last. Apathy, the greatest plague of all, the failure to make ending hunger a national priority. I wish you all a Chag Pesach Sameach, and I wish us all the courage to dig deep within ourselves as we work to rid ourselves of the plagues that inhibit us from creating a world without hunger.
Thank you, Rabbi Yanklowitz, for inspiring all of us to do our part to end hunger, and to Mazon for giving us the chance to share the 10 modern plagues of hunger from your National Hunger Seder Haggadah. We've invited David Greenfield, CEO and Executive Director of the Met Council, a Jewish organization dedicated to fighting poverty, to lead the next section of our Seder, and to connect the traditions of our celebration today to the work of ensuring food security for all.
It's all about the stories and the food and the family. That's what Passover is all about. And one of the most amazing ways that all this blends together is on the Seder plate, this really fascinating, traditionally round plate with some unusual items, but these items tell an incredible story through food. So let's take a look at these items that we have. We have the bitter herbs, usually horseradish. Ooh, that burns. And that's because it's supposed to remind you of how bitter the slavery was for the Jews in Egypt. Then you have this pasty stuff called charoset. It's actually pretty sweet, but the reminder is actually sour. It has the same texture as mortar, which was used by Jews to build items and bricks and buildings back in Egypt as well. Then we have a green vegetable that we use to dip. It's called karpas. We dip it in salty water to remind us of the tears. So sad it was when we were slaves back in Egypt. And one of the most fascinating items that we have is a roasted bone, a zeroa. The roasted shank bone reminds us of the Korban Pesach, the traditional ritual sacrifice that was brought in the temple some 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem. We also have an egg, a beya, and the egg reminds us of the circularity of life and eternity, but it also is a sad symbol because before Tisha B'Av, the day of mourning, we eat an egg as well. And finally, we have chazeret, which is a bitter herb, which I'll talk about in just a moment, usually romaine lettuce, that we use for the traditional Hillel sandwich. One of the things that I think is so meaningful about Passover is how the community comes together to look out for each other. And we do this together with the support of our government and the White House. And I'm so proud of the work that we've done this year at Met Council. We've helped over 325,000 people in need make sure that they have all the food that they need so they can celebrate with their families, because food insecurity is one of the biggest challenges that we have today in the United States of America. And finally, I do just want to end with this fascinating Hillel sandwich. There are a lot of religious reasons for the Hillel sandwich, but there are some traditional reasons as well. And if you look at the Hillel sandwich, essentially it's this unusual sandwich where you take 2 pieces of the matzah, and inside you put the bitter maror, the very sweet charoset, and the very bland green, which is usually a romaine lettuce, and you eat it together. And I like to think that this symbolizes what the holiday is all about. Regardless of your religious background or your personal politics or where you sit or what your philosophy is, we all come together as a Jewish nation to celebrate one of the most wonderful, iconic holidays that we tell through food, the stories of how we were freed from Egypt, and we celebrate the goodness and the amazing opportunity that we have to live free in these United States of America.
At the USDA, we are so proud to partner with the Met Council on their important work to support hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers, including Ukrainian refugees, Holocaust survivors, and so many others in need. We have reached the part of our Seder where it is time to find the Afikomen. And for those of you who, like me, have a hard time thinking of any part of a piece of matzah as a special treat, we have a different kind of treat planned for you. Coming to us straight from Broadway, where he is starring in Leopoldstadt, a passionate drama of love and endurance following one extended Jewish family for over 50 years, is the one and only Joshua Malina. I know that, like me, there are so many young leaders who were inspired to join the Biden-Harris administration by watching Will Bailey and the other characters on the West Wing as they taught us the value and honor of public service. Joshua has a long history of fighting hunger through his partnership with Mazon and by using his voice and platform to speak out. We are so excited for Joshua to share why he cares about this cause and what the holiday of Passover means to him.
Hi, Joshua Molina here, wishing everyone a Chag Pesach Sameach. Passover is a meaningful and wonderful time of the year for me and my family, as it is for most Jews. I think it's the single most widely observed Jewish holiday. I love that most of us begin our Seder with the words, "Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and celebrate." It's a beautiful thing to say, but hard to fulfill, especially literally. How many of us have the compassion or the wherewithal or the willingness to throw open our doors to anyone to come in and eat with us? So I would urge, as I urge myself every Passover, I would urge others to think about how at least to fulfill this mitzvah figuratively by helping to feed those who are hungry. I think I'm part of Tzafun in this Seder tonight, the Afikomen. And I will say I have fond memories of hiding the Afikomen from my parents, and then when they couldn't find it, even though they probably always could, holding it hostage for some sort of gift. I also remember being struck by the fact that the Afikomen was supposed to be considered a dessert, I guess. And I always was puzzled why half a piece of shmura matzah would be considered dessert. But I think following Shulchan Orech, the meal that most of us enjoy on Passover, it's a good time during the Afikomen to think about the fact, once again, that not everyone has a choice of what to eat, not everyone has enough to eat, and it's a good time to revisit "Let all who are hungry come and eat." So thank you for allowing me to be part of your Passover Seder, and I wish you a happy and meaningful holiday.
Thank you, Joshua. We are so glad that you were able to join us today. From all of us here at the White House, break a leg. It is time now for Barech, and Jeremy Burden, CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Boston, will help us open our doors to Elijah. Under his leadership, JCRC has thrived as a national model for community relations with a core mission of building a network of Jewish organizations that is a leader in service to the Jewish concerns and to the collective good.
It was here in Boston some 30 years ago that members of a women's Rosh Chodesh group began placing Miriam's cup on the Seder table. We fill it with water representing Miriam's well and inviting discussion about the role that women have always held at the center of our story. Elijah's cup, which we now fill with wine, signifies our aspirations for redemption. Together, these cups invite us to consider the centrality of women in the building of our community and of our persistent optimism for the future. We pause our Seder now with these cups filled to open our doors and welcome the prophetic presence to our table. For many, the tradition is to read out a curse, pour out your wrath. In my home, as in many of yours, we embrace an alternative reading, pour out your love, a blessing for those nations that embrace the lessons of the Exodus and who protect the Jewish people. As we open our doors at this White House National Seder, These two cups remind us of the centrality of American Jewish women in the story of this great nation, and that our nation is blessed when it embodies the values that come from the Exodus story, that we all were strangers once, whether in Egypt or arriving here, and that we must open and keep open our doors to others. This is an American story with American values, shaped over the generations, including by Jewish women. It was the 19th century Sephardic Jewish poet Emma Lazarus who gifted our nation with those indelible words of the new Colossus, cast forever on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. Shvoch avatcha al hagoyim asher yaducha. Pour out your love on the nations that know you, and on the kingdoms that call upon your name for the loving kindness that they perform with Jacob, and their defense of the people of Israel in the face of those that would devour them. May they be privileged to see the sukkah of peace spread for your chosen ones and rejoice in the joy of your nations. Zot kos Miriam, kos mayim chayim, zecher liyetziat Mitzrayim. This is the cup of Miriam, the cup of living waters. Let us remember the exodus from Egypt. These are the living waters, God's gift to Miriam, which gave new life to Israel as we struggled with ourselves in the wilderness. Blessed are you, God, who brings us from the narrows into the wilderness, sustains us with endless possibilities, and enables us to reach a new place. May we continue to know the blessings of Miriam and Elijah, of Emma, and of this great nation. May we commit ourselves, knowing that we were strangers once, to continue to open our doors to other refugees, welcoming the stranger into our country and homes so that they and we may come forth from the narrows and be redeemed as we reach new places.
Thank you, Jeremy, for bringing those beautiful cups for Elijah and Miriam to the Passover Seder, and for reminding us to keep both our hearts and our doors open. My name is Susie Stern, and I have a lot of titles, but I'm very proud to be the Vice President of Central Synagogue in New York City, and it gives me a great honor to introduce my rabbi who will lead us in the Hallel. Rabbi Angela Warnick-Buchtel is the senior rabbi at Central Synagogue in New York City. She is also the first Asian American rabbi in North America, and she is the first woman to lead this historic Reform congregation in its more than 180 years.
We are now near the end of our Passover Seder, and we end appropriately with songs of thanksgiving and praise. Hallel is a collection of Psalms 113 to 118, the first two recalling our exodus from Egypt, and the last four our journey into the Promised Land. It's a journey that we reflect in our own lives, of going from enslavement to liberation. It captures the possibility of going from degradation to praise. But we know that sometimes our life can go in the other direction, and it is by the grace of God that we have had this feast today, that we have enjoyed the freedoms we enjoy. But let us never forget what it's like to be on the other side. That is part of the message of this Seder. So part of the way we recall that is by reminding ourselves with humility that we are here with gratitude and full hearts. So let us join together in this Psalm 118 of praising God. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov. We give thanks to God, for God is good. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov. Ki le'olam chasto. Ki le'olam chasto. Yomarna, yomarna, Yisrael. Ki le'olam chasto, ki le'olam chasto. Let all who revere God's name now say, Ki le'olam chasto. Give thanks to the one, for God is good. Ki le'olam chasto. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov. Ki
כי לעולם חסד
Hello, everyone. Chef Jose Andres here. I hope you're having a happy Passover. I am honored to join you all to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. From my own restaurants around the country to my work around the world with my nonprofit World Central Kitchen to my very own family. I know the power of food to bring people together in good times and difficult times. Food is our universal language. How we nourish our bodies and our souls, how we celebrate our traditions, and how we create stronger communities. There is no gesture more important than sharing a meal with somebody in need. It's the only way we will build longer tables where there is room for everyone to eat, not just during holidays, celebrations, and gatherings, but every single day of the year. It takes a commitment from all of us. And I know so many of you here with us today are so dedicated to fighting food insecurity in your communities nationwide and around the world. It's why I'm honored to be the co-chair of the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition, where our goal is to showcase to the amazing work being done around the country to promote good health and nutrition food for all, and empower even more people to join us in the fight against hunger. Okay, well, that's enough from me, unless anybody is going to ask me for cooking tips for your Passover Seder. Without further ado, I am so proud to introduce my friend, a man we are fortunate to call the second gentleman of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, Doug Emhoff.
Hello, everyone, and happy Passover. It's wonderful to join you at the White House's third virtual Passover celebration, otherwise known as the People's Seder. On the first night of Passover, my wife, Vice President Kamala Harris, and I hosted a Seder at our home. Reading the story of the Exodus serves as a reminder of the journey from oppression to freedom, a journey that is ongoing for so many. During the Seder, we say, "Let all who are hungry come and eat." This year's virtual Seder theme is food security. It's a topic that doesn't get nearly as much attention as it deserves. I've heard directly from families across the country about the impact that food insecurity has had on them, from cities to rural communities across so many states. I still remember those long lines outside of food banks during the height of the COVID pandemic. I remember speaking with parents who were worried about finding the next meal for their family. And since the height of the pandemic, our nation has come so far. President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack are pioneering solutions to combat hunger and food insecurity. Our administration is committed to ending hunger by 2030, and we're continuing to make progress towards meeting this goal. During Passover, we also recommit to combating anti-Semitism and hate. We all know we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism across the nation and across the world. People are no longer saying the quiet parts out loud. They are literally screaming them. Combating this hate requires an all-of-society approach. We need to speak out and call out those who don't. We need to make sure that people feel safe in their homes, where they practice their faith, and in their communities. And we need to educate others to ensure that history does not repeat itself. We need to push back against Holocaust denial, distortion, and disinformation. And during my recent trip to Poland and Germany, I met with community leaders, interfaith leaders, and government officials to increase and better coordinate our efforts to counter anti-Semitism and other forms of hate. Our administration will continue to condemn anti-Semitism at every turn. I'm proud to be Jewish, and I'm proud to be openly living as a Jew. We will not live in fear, and we refuse to be afraid. So thank you to everyone who has joined us today. and to the advocates on this call for all your work on these critical issues. It's going to take all of us working together to end hunger and end hate. Passover reminds us that even in our most challenging moments, there is hope for renewal and liberation. Wishing you all a happy Passover and Chag Sameach.
In this time of rising anti-Semitism, what could be more important than standing together as a Jewish community with our interfaith partners in times of crisis and in times of celebration, standing up for our values and for our neighbors, taking a stake in each other's goals and dreams. At this very moment, tens of thousands of people across the country are gathered around phones and laptops, sharing this Passover Seder together. Whether we live in big cities with large Jewish communities or in small towns and rural parts of America where we are small in number but mighty in spirit, we are not alone. As we conclude today, we give thanks to our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, for his leadership on issues of importance to the Jewish community. We give thanks to our Agriculture Secretary, Tom Vilsack, for his commitment to work with the Jewish community and all of our interfaith partners on this important mission. We give thanks to our Seder participants whose music and words and hard work inspire all of us. We give thanks for the Passover story and its enduring message of freedom and justice. We give thanks for the opportunity to gather and lift our voices to speak out on behalf of those who are hungry and hurting. We give thanks to the farmers and ranchers across the country who grow and produce our food, and we promise to support them in times of stress and crisis. We pray that at this time next year, we will all live in a world where all Americans and people everywhere are free from hunger and blessed with abundance. Amen.
Had gadja, had gadja, had gadja, had gadja. Tisabra babi trezuze, had gadja, had gadja, had gadja, had gadja. Tisabra babi trezuze, had gadja, had gadja, had gadja, had gadja. Tisabra babi trezuze, had gadja, had gadja, had gadja, had gadja. Beata chutra, vehika lechalba, tenashach leshun.